Late one night in October, as my family sat huddled together in our living room, my mother told us stories from her childhood. This story was about my grandmother's house in Pakistan. She told us that the house should have been out of place due to being pastel green, but it fit in because the neighborhood was filled with houses of strange, bright colors. The two-story house had 5 rooms, each filled with a different story. Over the years, as my mother and aunts moved in after their marriage, the house collected memories from each of their lives. Later, when all the kids were born, we imprinted our own memories in the house each time we visited. As my mother painted the picture of the house, I couldn't help but compare it to the people around me. Like my house, everyone holds many memories and experiences from the people who have touched them. I admired the uniqueness of the house and humankind. As my parents brought my family and I to America in 2006 in hopes of bettering our future. Since then, I've been baffled by America. America is a land filled with people who look different than me, who have a different culture and upbringing, but there are some things that we all have in common. I found people who shared my desire to learn and found joy in the smallest of things. Despite the language barrier the first few years in America, I found myself communicating with everyone around me. I found people who spread kindness just because they could. I saw it when someone would pay for the person behind them at Starbucks, or when we held events like a 5K run or a donor drive to help the homeless in my school district. During the first few years in America, I learned the power of the human bond and compassion. I learned to believe in it, in feeling someone's pain, relating to their struggles, and choosing to help them. We're all unique, but we fit in together just like my grandmother's house in the unique neighborhood. Everyone has had an impact on someone's life, whether we know it or not. My mother used to tell me, "Be kind. You don't know whose life you could change or what anyone is going through." After she told me that, I started paying attention to the interactions between people. I saw how prevalent compassion was. I saw it when my Muslim community banded together to support one of our members who lost his house, or when my government teacher took in 2 foreign exchange students whose host family no longer wanted them. I even saw it in my personal life. I saw it when my optometrist held my hand as she told me I was going blind, shattering my dreams of becoming an eye surgeon. My entire world had shifted, but her holding my hand made me feel like everything was going to be okay. After my first year in America, my family moved to Lawton for a job opportunity. On my last day of school, my teachers called me into the hallway. They handed me a package wrapped in gray paper. Filled with excitement, I went to the corner of the hallway where we all kneeled to open the present. Inside of it were 3 gray and white ceramic cats. They told me that they saw how hard I had struggled all year to learn English and wanted to tell me that they were proud of me. I felt touched that they cared. That memory has largely shaped who I am today. When I'm confronted with a difficult situation, I remember my teacher's kindness and remind myself to be more like them. I don't think they realized that through their small gesture, they had impacted my life so strongly. We all go through similar interactions in our daily lives. Doing something as small as holding the door open for someone or smiling at someone as you pass them can have a positive impact on their lives. Like my grandmother's house, we hold these interactions inside of us. They shape who we become. I believe that compassion can change the world. Putting yourself in someone's shoes and understanding their pain is the first step in making a world where no one suffers. It breaks my heart to see the immigration crisis in the news. I believe that there is a humane solution to the crisis, and it's one that can be found through compassion. Every person's life story reflects not only who they are as a person, but also the people who have touched them. Through being unique and using compassion, we form bonds. These bonds make us unique. Compassion goes beyond language. It breaks barriers and pushes people to become the best versions of themselves. I truly believe that compassion changes lives. My grandmother's house has stayed strong for 70 years, and my family continues to add their memories to the house. I believe that the world can stay just as strong if we understand the value of the bonds we have with each other and learn to show compassion.
It's okay if it feels weird to clap for somebody who's not here. It is my honor to be here to read Clarke's essay to you all. I'm especially happy because I've heard different versions of this story throughout the years as he's told a similar version of this at our orientation camp, Camp Crimson, which I worked at for many years. But I want to make it clear that I'll do my best to give you Clarke's version of the story, but I am no Clarke Stroud. So here goes. Life is noisy. Work is all-encompassing. Family is demanding. The media is embedded in our every move. It is harder than ever to connect with our Creator, nearly impossible to hear the voice of God. As such, I often find myself in a position I never thought possible, a lonely place void of a Creator that I know loves me and wants what's best for me. Deaf to her advice, words of love, signs, and directions. The noise around me is deafening, demanding my attention and time. I say to myself, I believe I am a bowling ball careening through space. I am out of control. 25 years ago, I realized the pace and racket of life had left me feeling very alone. I met some high school friends for a fly fishing trip back home in Colorado. After a week standing in streams and casting artificial flies, I came back to work with new direction and vigor. What had happened? I had reconnected to my Creator. The clamor was gone, replaced with her voice and counsel. I came away with a real sense of connection to God and to those around me. To illustrate this point, some years after our initial trip, my friends and I found ourselves on the White River in northwestern Colorado. My friend Tom had been diagnosed with X-linked adrenoleukodystrophy, a debilitating muscular dystrophy that eventually results in paralysis and dementia. As Tom's disease progressed, it became much more difficult for him to wade in the treacherous mountain streams. As such, we would take turns floating the rivers with Tom so he could fish from the boat. This particular year, I was rowing with Tom while he fished from the front of the boat. As we approached this particularly tasty grass bank with a deep hole, he perfectly cast his fly onto the bank and let it drop off into the water. It was perfect presentation. Immediately, a huge trout leaped up at the fly and took off downstream with the fly in his mouth. Tom yelled, "That's a slab!" And I knew he had a trophy-sized fish on the end of that line, and immediately started rowing faster as the fish ripped line off of his reel. It became evident that I was not going to be able to row fast enough to keep up with the fish. Further, Tom's balance was precarious on land, let alone in this flimsy plastic boat. He demanded that I get him to the bank on the opposite side where he could more aptly bring the fish in. He continued yelling demands to me while I did my best to land the boat and help Tom out onto the bank. Meanwhile, the fish continued to rip line off of his reel. I can still hear the zipping sound of the line flying off the reel. As I got Tom out of the boat, he yelled that we had to get downstream. Frustrated as I had just landed the boat and gotten Tom onto the bank, I knew there was no time to get back into the boat and push the boat into the water. So I put one of Tom's arms around my neck and we waded into the rushing water and began trekking downstream. This fish was merciless. He continued running while Tom held the fly rod high with his right hand. The line ripped. We were moving downstream in the middle of the river when Tom asked me, "You got me?" As we were slipping and sliding, I managed to tell him, "I got you, Tom." Suddenly, as if cursed to have my promised friend that we were all right, we both went down in the water. I did my best to push Tom to the surface, working concurrently to establish footing. Tom kept his fly rod above water, holding it high, and the line was ripping. We floated what must have been a quarter of a mile before I was able to pull Tom to the bank. He had supernaturally managed to keep his rod up and the line tight. He still had the fish. As I got him settled on the bank, soaking wet, Tom masterfully worked for the fish for what must have been 30 minutes. As the fish approached our bank, I was able to see just how magnificent it was. This trout was 30 inches and over 8 pounds. It was a once-in-a-lifetime catch. Tom landed the fish, we took a picture, and released him back into the water. Later that night, we all sat next to the campfire recounting the conquests of that day on the river. Tom sat silent until the rest of the guys had told their stories. He accurately recounted our adventure and eventual success. As he finished, I looked at Tom and told him, "You caught the biggest trout I've ever seen." Tom looked at me and said, "We caught that fish, Clarke." I'm grateful to have been with Tom that day. He passed away a few years later from his disease. God allowed me to share that moment with Tom as he landed a one-of-a-kind fish. Further, God taught me a valuable lesson. She reminded me that life is an individual sport, just like fishing. We have to get ourselves ready each day, own the words that we say, make decisions, and plot a course for our lives. As an example, the diplomas that hang in my office are records of my own individual achievements. And yet, my Creator taught me an important lesson, and one of many more to come, at that moment by the campfire. We are interdependent on each other. We need those that God puts into our lives. Whether it's a shoulder to cry on, an encouraging word at the right time, someone to laugh with, mourn with, or to celebrate, we need each other. My time in the mountain streams of Colorado has given me many opportunities to commune with my Creator. She reminds me how important it is to make time for God and to listen to her words. When life pulls me away from God, I am reminded of my time with Tom, and one of those first times I felt her anchoring words. Surrounded by the sensory overload of the rushing water, she whispers, "You are a bowling ball careening through space," and I whisper back, "I believe I am led by your guiding hand."
I want to commend all of you speakers before me, especially the young people. You inspired me, and I wish I was as wise as you are at your age. Thank you. A 6-year-old little girl came home from her first day of school, and her mom asked, "How did it go?" And she answered, "Okay, but I don't think this one kid likes me very much." And the mom proceeded to tell her that she must be mistaken. I mean, everyone likes you. You need to realize this. Everyone likes you. Well, fast forward to junior high, to high school, and then even to college. And this little girl that thought everyone, every single person liked her because of what her mom said, was sitting in a sociology class in college, 19 years old, and the professor said, "Can you believe that some people think everyone likes them? Can you believe that some people believe certain things just because someone told them it's that way?" Well, yes, I was that little girl. I was the one who had unrealistic expectations about people. And I can still hear my mom's voice as she said, "Of course everyone likes you." Now, imagine for a moment how shattered this small town girl felt when she came to the realization that everyone wouldn't like her, even though her mom had the best intentions. This was an erroneous assumption. Now, my mom, looking at all my best qualities, as moms do, right, loving me unconditionally, felt assured that everyone liked me. And when I realized that everyone didn't like me, I was dumbfounded. And this, my friends, was a defining moment in my life. This moment truly changed the course of my life, from thinking and worrying so much about what other people thought. Now, you may be asking, so you don't do that anymore? Well, of course I do. Much less. But there's a little voice in my head that says, don't be unrealistic. Don't let yourself, don't give yourself up. It's absolutely absurd to think that everyone, every person, everywhere, every single situation will like you. At the age of 19, that was a defining moment that would impact the trajectory of my life. Life is a series of defining moments, isn't it? You know, some are good, some are bad. And at some point, we will all have that moment when something happens that influences and changes our path. Taking time to step away and to reflect on these moments are significant building blocks so we can grow, we can improve, we can listen, and we can learn. I believe that we should use defining moments to be better people. I believe that we should use defining moments to enhance our character, and if acted upon, these moments can build virtues in us. Virtues like compassion and kindness, patience, perseverance, honesty, courage, humanity, and humility. I believe that we should use defining moments as pivotal turning points. And I believe that we should learn. We should learn from our celebrations and our failures, from our shining moments and from our darkest days, from our easy wins and our most difficult losses. Back to my story. Now, my realization that all people would not like me was a huge turning point. But because of this experience, I became less of a people pleaser and more introspective, recognizing this defining moment was truly transformative. But there were other things in my childhood that became defining moments as well. When my brother and I were kids, my dad, typically on a Saturday, would realize that we didn't have enough to do, and he would call us out into the yard, and he would have a task for us to do. Now, my dad liked to teach us how to move brick. Move brick. Now, moving brick is hard work, especially for a kid, right? So my dad would point and he would say, I want you to move all the brick from this tree to that tree on the other side of the yard. Well, when my dad said that, we never asked why. That was a family rule. You didn't ask why. When my dad said something, you did it, and you did it immediately, and you had a good attitude when you did it. Well, that day, my brother and I worked for several hours moving brick from one side of the yard to the other. And then the next weekend came, yet another Saturday, and we went out to the yard, and I remember thinking, at least we don't have to move brick. I mean, we've already done that, so that task is completed. Well, you can imagine the priceless look on our faces when my dad told my brother and I want you to go over to the brick that you moved last Saturday to this side of the yard, and I want you to move it back to this side of the yard. And I thought, my dad has lost his mind. I mean, what is wrong with him? Does he hate us? What is going on? Well, my brother and I, we weren't happy, but we started our task of moving bricks back to the other side of the yard. And the whole time I walked from side to side of the yard, when stacking bricks in my hand, a little voice said to me, this is so stupid. But I knew that I had to do it anyway. But all of a sudden, well, not really. It took years later. All of a sudden, it became clear to me, we didn't move brick because my dad was angry at us, or even because he was bored. It wasn't because he didn't love us. We moved brick because my dad wanted to teach us a life lesson. He wanted to teach us hard work. He wanted to teach us perseverance. He wanted to teach us self-control. And when I say moving brick, I mean actually moving and stacking brick. And that usually meant doing it a very precise way. And I won't lie. When he said move the brick to the other side of the yard after we had already done it once, to the same tree that we had moved it to before, I had to count. Not to 10, but to 100. And I knew if I lost my temper and acted out, I was going to be disciplined by moving double and triple the amount of brick the next Saturday he called us out into the yard. And you might say, this was a defining moment. This was the point where I began to understand that sometimes you don't get to pick in life what you want to do. Sometimes you have to do things just because someone instructed you to do them. Sometimes it really didn't make sense. Sometimes you have to work hard and carry out a task even when you don't see the end result in sight. You have to do it even if you don't know how it might affect the trajectory of your life. Well, moving brick taught me much more than manual labor. It taught me hard work. It taught me how to persevere, how to have self-control, and to wait for the big picture to unfold. Moving brick was my father's way of trying to teach us life lessons through a mundane task. And yes, moving brick was a defining moment. So friends, I ask you to remember this. Defining moments can be invisible if we don't take time to really think about them. Or defining moments, if acted upon, they can be a catalyst for improvement and growth. I believe in defining moments, and I want to challenge each of you to pay attention and to look for yours.
One of the great things that I really like about this series is really the great thing about being at a university. We come here because we know that there is some knowledge so important that it changes the people who know it. Some knowledge so important that it changes the people we know. Transformational learning. And I think this program, with its exploration of values and how we see ourselves and what we think is possible for the future, is just really hugely important. So thank you for what you're doing with this program. I've thought about race for a long time. My mom was from Oklahoma and grew up in a dirt poor white family with 10 kids. My dad was from Mexico, so I'm a Mexican American, a racially mixed person. Desperate to escape poverty, my mom did not want to associate with anyone who she thought was lower on the social ladder, like a Mexican American or a Mexican. I can remember her saying to me, "You are Spanish. You are not a Mexican." Now, as an adult, I would reply simply that, "Mom, there is a name for the children of the Spanish who came to Mexico and married indigenous people. They are called Mexicans." This assertion made her angry. There was a short story called "Never Marry a Mexican," and that message was familiar to me while growing up. My mother did not want me to identify as Mexican American or make things worse by marrying another Mexican American or, God forbid, a Mexican. If you think much about race in America, that is an indication that you are probably not white. White people have little reason to think about race. A few years ago, after thinking about race extensively, I wrote a book about racism in the US, and this choice sealed the deal with my mom. She was done with me, at least in this regard. She had tried to open the door to being white, and it closed it. In some ways, she was right. The book I wrote, Mestizos Come Home, Making and Claiming Mexican American Identity, was life-changing. I discovered, for example, that James Madison and Alexander Hamilton did not say what white people and those from the far right, like the political scientist Samuel Huntington, who spent some time on this campus, attributed to them. Madison and Hamilton never intended for America to work exclusively for white people. Valuing the American idea of a multicultural democracy, they believed that if you could get here, you were family. Did they achieve that goal, and did they completely understand it? No. And we are still learning what it means to live in a multicultural democracy. But that goal was noble and revolutionary, and it will be a great day if we ever achieve it. I particularly wanted to challenge the very idea of race, whether it exists at all. Listen to the following 3 most common propositions about race and think about your response to each one. No, I'm not saying that people say these things explicitly, but these are the most common underlying values and propositions about race. 1, nature divides people into racial hierarchies, and we must respect that social order. 2, nature divides people into racial hierarchies, and those at the top need to show compassion for those at the bottom. 3, nature creates races that everybody belongs to, and enlightened people must destroy oppressive social orders so that all can live peacefully together. This last one is the liberal approach that wants to put all races on an equal footing. In all 3 cases, there is the underlying assumption that racial division between people is unalterable. These assumptions prove that we have yet to catch up with current genetic science, which demonstrates that there is no basis in nature for the notion of race at all. Genetic scientist Howard M. Kahn notes that human genome diversity studies have clearly shown that the large part of genetic variability is due to differences among individuals within populations rather than to differences between populations. Yes, we can see similar skin tones, hair types, and body proportions in different communities. Kahn shows, however, that there is generally more genetic variance among random people in a cohort than there is separating cohorts and communities. In a word, there is no genetic foundation for the concept of race. You might then ask, okay, how can we explain the persistence of the idea of race almost everywhere? If race does not exist in nature, then why is the reign of race still a phenomenon worldwide with people organizing their lives around it? The answer involves the history of modern racism. And this is absolutely fascinating. In Europe in the 18th century, racial schemes were advanced as tools for colonialism to bolster social control. Early scientists in the 18th century promoted racial hierarchies that celebrated the white colonial world and cast aspersions pretty much on everybody else. They made Caucasian, this was a term defined really pretty late historically in the 18th century, they made Caucasian a separate superior race that was supposedly original and purest form of being human. This wildly mistaken claim became the foundation for racial categories throughout the colonized world, especially the idea of attaching far-reaching social judgments to genetic patterns that were often inaccurate and very often misunderstood. Current genetic science repudiates the existence of such categories in nature, but many people still reference them anyway. Now, in our world, the Spanish created a similar racial system in the Americas. People don't talk about this enough. During the conquest, they brought in Africans and others as slaves. When those diverse peoples intermarried, the Spanish were challenged to deal with many new identities. They created the casta system, like as in caste, of 16 racial types that was intended to account for all new identities. This racist system was improvised and constantly changed, but it nonetheless became a staple of culture in this hemisphere. To this day, if you live in the Americas, you cannot look at the skin on your arms and hands without seeing through the lens that the Spanish created. It's time to end that. Knowing about the cultural inheritance of 18th century flawed science and the casta system in the Americas is critical to gaining insight into racism's entrenched historical and economic and social complexities. So you can see my book, The Caesars Come Home, for the details, or in the reception. If you ask me about it, I will tell you about the early racism and then racism after 1700 for free. We can just talk about it. I believe that trying to defeat racism without understanding those histories is like playing whack-a-mole. Until we acknowledge the racial past and recognizing the concept of race itself, it's the concept itself, not the way it's used. The concept itself is the problem. As the problem, the very idea of race will keep returning in different guises. I believe that until we destroy it and put it to rest for good, the concept of race will keep reappearing as a toxic force seeping into our culture and values. Thank you.
Hamlet asked, to be or not to be? That is the question, and I couldn't have put it better myself. My experience with the word perseverance has not been a good one in my recent past, yet here I am. My opinion may be a controversial one, but I believe that it is not the choice to persevere that matters, but the acknowledgement that you are already doing so. In my experience, I have never actively chosen to keep going, but I have learned to recognize that I am already subconsciously doing it. Not long ago, I couldn't find any tangible reasons to live. I made excuses that my loved ones would move on and that I could be at peace, yet for years I never acted on this thought process. Was I afraid? Yes, but not of dying. I started seeing a counselor regularly, and one of the points she repeatedly tried to impress upon me was that I am much stronger than I let myself believe. She commented on my struggles and how much strength it took to still be here seeking help because of them. I was so confused. How could I possibly be showing strength when I couldn't tell myself to push forward? I felt like I was just going through the motions of life, but I didn't understand why. The fear that I wasn't doing enough was ingrained so deeply in my mind that I could no longer separate this thought from reality. The reality was and is that I am sick, and it is not my fault, despite what I have conditioned myself to think. Everyone knows the story of the tortoise and the hare, and we are taught that slow and steady perseverance wins the race. And yet, as we grow up, it is a race of rabbits. Nobody has wanted to be the tortoise in a long time. Especially in college, when everything is a contest and we all push ourselves to get there first. For people like me, that is a deadly sin. My depression renders me incapable of the simplest things, like getting out of bed, while my mania and anxiety torture me with insults of laziness and procrastination and deadlines. The inability to force myself to do schoolwork or important tasks until the stress made me physically sick was a problem I knew I had, but I did not understand its severity. I am not just a hare. I am a hare that is trapped in the 1 square foot area that is my own head, forced to go in circles. My journey with persistence almost came to an end. I was hospitalized because I was tired of living without any idea of purpose or reason. I struggled for too long, and I thought I had reached the end, the breaking point. The camel wasn't carrying straws, she was enduring bricks. I'll spare you of the details, but I will say this. Despite my interesting stance on perseverance and my long, angry battle with it, I agree with many that it is one of the most important virtues that one can hold. I have a new appreciation for the depth and complexity of the word and all of its meanings. This experience was life-changing. After all was said and done, I realized that I was truly regretful of what I had done. But I am ever so grateful for the journey. I am still recovering and still fighting, but I do so with a newfound hope and the ability to look forward to the next race. I am not persevering. I am simply acknowledging that I have gotten this far and that there is no reason to give up now. I am acknowledging that perseverance manifested itself in all of the excuses I made to continue to live. My blind routine of just getting through the day was an example of this. Hamlet did not have a question, because having a question means having doubts, which is the acknowledgement of perseverance, not the decision to persevere. This, I believe.
I want to say good afternoon. It's such a joy to be back here in my alma mater. I'm really excited. I want to say great job to my peers. You all, I love hearing your stories. Thank you so much. I believe that we are living in a wake-up call in America. We are experiencing a great divide in so many areas, racially, economically, religiously, politically, even educationally. There's a great tension in our culture that's pulling people left and right, up and down. But when we look at the data today, according to Pew Research, America has become increasingly more politically polarized over the past 25 years. Those on the right are further right, and those on the left are further left. Oftentimes in politics, folks like to use buzzwords like compromise, when in fact they mean they want the opposing side to cave into what they believe and what they want, and they're not actually willing to compromise or meet others in the middle. So everything around us in social media seems to be at odds, especially social media. If you're not this, then you're that. Our nation's pledge says that we are indivisible. But today we are being tested on how true this may or may not be. As a participant in this great democracy, I am filled with great disappointment and fear. How did we get here? Where do we go from here? Just as in battle as our nation is, I am equally confident and empowered to change the status quo. What I can say with certainty is that America is sick and it needs healing. Our nation needs to be admitted to the ICU, Intensive Care Unit. Now stay with me and you'll understand my play on words. First, we must express empathy as an ICU. When we are engaging in discourse with other people, are we listening to respond or are we listening to understand? When I was a college student here on this campus, I dealt with several hardships, including depression. Yet through my trials, I can vividly remember times when I felt heard and understood by others who recognized my battles and my efforts to fight on. Angie Wright, who's the director of the Henderson Scholars Program, she called me on a random day to check up on me. I gave her an update and I said I was doing fine and making the necessary steps to improve my academics. But at the end of the call, she said to me, she always called me Baker. She always called me by my last name. I don't know why. But she said, "Baker, I'm proud of you." Immediately, this struck a chord in my heart, and I began to weep tears of happiness. Wow, somebody sees how hard I'm working. She sees that I'm trying my best, and she celebrates me for that. Now imagine, what if we could help others experience the same feeling every day? Meeting people where they are at in their lives and helping them, supporting them towards positive progress. Thank you, Angie, for setting that example for me. Next, compassion, intensive care unit. How are we caring for others? A famous music artist once said, "What have you done for me lately?" Ooh, yeah. Now I know that might be dated for some of these kids in the room, but for the older folks, I appreciate what Miss Janna Jackson was saying. It makes me think, what have I done for others? You know that feeling when you've done a good deed for someone else, when you help someone and you see that your presence, your time, your money, your investment greatly alleviated their difficulty. That's a great feeling to have. I believe that feeling is an intuitive reinforcement of our communal purpose, service to others for the good of all. This is compassion. When we think about the landscape of the world, and some of us were born with blessings falling down on us, and some of us did not have the same privileges as others right at birth. However, those of us who have received benefits or blessings that we did not earn nor deserve need to reach out and help those who received deficits that they did not earn nor deserve, and help them to get where we are so they too may enjoy these benefits that so many of us take for granted each and every day. We can do this in so many ways: acts of service, words of affirmation, financial help, mentorship, friendship, and whatever way you can serve others. So despite the tensions of this world, this I believe, with the right determination, diligence, respect, and compassion, we will heal. We will continue to grow stronger, and the world will become a better place if we take our individual investments in serving others and serving the people around us. There's a sign that's on I-35 southbound and more that I love every time when I come to Norman, and it reads, "Fear is contagious, but so is hope. So may the contagion of hope, goodwill, and kindness spread among all of those who you encounter each and every day." Thank you.
From an early age, no matter who you are, we are all faced with challenges in life we must overcome. From learning how to walk, talk, read and write, or simply learning how to ride a bicycle. However, for some people, more obstacles are thrown their way than they could have ever imagined. Remembering back on my childhood, my life was amazing. I lived in what we called the brick house right across the street from the town's elementary school. I had my own room filled with toys and games, and my oldest sister and my twin and I could have not been any closer. We were the best of buds, and we spent our days carefree. What more could we have possibly wanted? Life was great, but nothing could have prepared me for the next 13 years of my life, which seemed to be a series of one misfortunate event after the next. I still to this day have no idea how I made it through those dark times, but one thing is for sure, and that is that it took a ton of perseverance. Being so young, I possibly missed all the warning signs of things that happened, so for me, it felt like everything was happening out of nowhere. My dad got into some trouble, which caused him to lose his job as a bail bondman. Soon, money simply wasn't flowing in like it once had. We found ourselves moving in with my grandma because we simply could not afford to live in the brick house any longer. We eventually got settled in at my grandma's house, and things weren't too bad at first. However, it wasn't long until the stress began to take a toll on everyone. My day-to-day life consisted of going to school in the morning and returning home to my grandma's house, only to find that my mom was at work, and as for my dad, there was no telling where he was. When he was home, the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My dad had anger issues, and the smallest of things could set him off, and sometimes he would take it out on us, both emotionally and physically. The only thing that could ever seem to extinguish his anger was my grandma. She was truly my best friend and who was always there for me. Whenever I felt I had no one to come to, she was always there, waiting with an open heart, arms, and ears. Whenever I didn't feel good or I had a nightmare, she was always there to let me crawl in bed with her. She was my rock. Then one day, all of that changed when I was awakened to the yelling of my great aunt. I can still hear her screaming, "Call 911, call 911. It wasn't long until everyone in the house was awoken by the commotion. At some point in the early hours of Sunday morning, my grandma had a stroke. I remember holding my sisters while we cried and cried, but I didn't cry. I knew I had to be the strong one for them. She was taken to the hospital where she stayed for the next couple of months. While celebrating my oldest sister's birthday, we got the call that my grandma was not going to make it. In the next few days, we made our way to the hospital to see her one last time. I can still see her lying on that hospital bed. The only thing keeping her alive was the machine next to her. Seeing her like that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I wanted to just break down right then and there, but I couldn't. I had to be the strong one. June 8th, 2009, I lost my best friend. I have never felt so broken and defeated in my life. Through it all, I never let it show once. I got up every morning and went to school with a smile on my face. Not a single soul could tell there was anything wrong with me for all of those years. Time went on and things just kept happening. We went through so many periods of time where we were homeless, didn't have food, we didn't have anything. Yet I still pushed forward. Life seemed to be a never-ending sea of suffering for my family and me, and it felt like things were never going to get better. That this was just the life I had, and I had to just deal with it. It had become too much to bear. Finally, I just broke down. I remember lying on the floor, so lost, so empty, and so alone. I didn't know what to do. As I lay there, I began to think. I realized something. I realized that it's okay to feel down and to feel like you reached your breaking point, but you still must get up. My grandma was always the strong one, and after she had passed, I felt I had to assume that role for my family. But I had forgotten that even the strongest of the strongest need a shoulder to lean on sometimes. Even though I no longer had my grandma, my best friend, I had a guardian angel to watch over me and help pick me up when I was down. So in that moment, I had two choices. I could lay there, give up, and accept defeat, or I could persevere. So I picked myself up and did what I did best. I charged forward. Fast forward to the present, and here I am, a freshman at the University of Oklahoma and a member of the Pride of Oklahoma. I have overcome every single obstacle that was thrown my way, thanks to my strong sense of the virtue of perseverance that was instilled in me by my grandma. Here at OU and everywhere I go, I hope to be a beacon of light to those who feel they can no longer go on, for those who feel they'll never be good enough to make the team, for those who want to stop trying. I want to let them know, do not give up, because with perseverance, you are unstoppable. I would like to leave you with the words of two inspirational people. To quote Maya Angelou, "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter defeats so you can know who you are and what you can arise from and how you can still come out of it. And when you feel like you can't go on anymore, just remember the words of the great Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. We may not be able to control what happens to us in life, but what we can do is choose how we handle it. And with perseverance, we will make it through the storm. Thank you.
You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter the defeats so you know who you are, what you can rise from, how you can still come out of it. Maya Angelou. Perseverance is an effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties. It is continuing to push through when odds are stacked against you. Whether we wear it on our sleeve or deep down in our soul, everyone possesses this virtue. Though many obstacles may come our way, it is through perseverance that we overcome these hurdles to reach our success. One of the most important people in my life who portrayed this virtue was my mother, a strong Black woman who has never given up on her dreams, a warrior on the outside who fought hard to hide her pain. After completing 1 year of college, my mother dropped out and returned home to raise my sister. As a young girl, I saw how hard my mother worked to provide for me as a single parent. Even in the midst of it all, her fortitude persisted. For instance, she accomplished her goals of becoming a business owner and founder of a nonprofit organization. She has always instilled in me the importance of an education by motivating me to pursue a college degree. As a result, everything I am today is because of her. Being the first person in my family to attend a university was monumental. Although I was anxious, I was excited for the opportunity to be a change in my family and be a role model for those behind me. This was an exciting time, but because I knew that I would have to work hard in order for me to attend, the easy part for me was getting accepted to college, but the hard part was finding the scholarships that would help me continue my education. Studies have shown that two-thirds of African Americans drop out of college due to financial reasons. I refused to be a part of that statistical group. Senior year, I worked hard daily to write essays for scholarships, and I worked long hours to save up for college. Regardless of the unrelenting amount of essays and applications I had to complete, I knew that a college education was something I wanted more than anything. If I would have let my failure stop me from pursuing my dreams, I would not be in the positions I am today. Through my experience at the university, I have faced many obstacles inside and outside of the classroom. Whether it was failing my first exam or experiencing microaggressions, I never let those deter me from my goals. These past few weeks have been the hardest of my college career. Having to experience the pain that affected my community through racial incidents was not easy. When I wanted to quit and leave, I thought of the quote from Michelle Obama, "When they go low, we go high." No matter how much pain or how many rejections I may endure, I will always do what it takes for me to get to where I need to be. Through perseverance, I will never stop shining a light at my university or in my community. There is nothing or no one that can tell me that I will not be successful. Trials and tribulations may come my way, but it will not take me long to break down those barriers. My mother always told me that the only person that can stop me is me. Therefore, I can only live today and hope that through hard work and dedication, tomorrow will come. Thank you.
The thing about starting all of your assignments at the last minute is recognizing that you are a couple of things. One, you're a master procrastinator of the highest order, and two, that you're naively overconfident in your capabilities under pressure. Rest assured, I am fully aware I'm a marvelous example of both of these character flaws. However, I couldn't think of a better way to exemplify what I am writing about today than to admit to my own procrastination. I can say I believe in honesty, but I'm not a big fan of ambiguity. I'm an even lesser fan of cliche essays. I do believe in honesty. What I believe in even more is honesty coded in personal humility. It's never come easy for me to admit I wasn't good at something. I've never had to be the best, but I always had to be better than most. When I started kindergarten, I had to make A's and read third grade level books. I had to never get picked last for games, and I had to make sure I got on varsity in high school, or sports just weren't worth it to me. I believed I had to show I was knowledgeable, even when I wasn't. They say to fake it until you make it, and I faked it and can fake it well. I can sing, play a sport, make friends, get good grades, and expand past my comfort zone because I've always wanted to be personified as capable. That doesn't make me an anomaly. In fact, seeking high regard with others is a natural part of the human experience. Everyone wants to be good at life's many skills. Everyone wants to connect with others easily, and everyone wants to hide any part of themselves they don't deem doesn't serve either of those ends. Of course, everyone is not good at everything. In fact, some people are quite bad at certain things. I, for instance, can barely write anything until I feel the pressure of a deadline. And in fact, just the other day, I burned frozen pasta because I can't cook anything except toast in a Hot Pocket. That doesn't make me look capable at all. What I have learned in my pursuit of looking like I have my stuff together is the power in admitting that I don't. I've come to realize that vulnerability is the antidote to the anxiety of false confidence. I've discovered this lesson in no particular way that I can remember, probably a book or by accident. But I can tell you that this has become a personal truism that has defined me for the better part of a year. Having come to college, I've realized I had to invest in intellectual, personal, and social humility. I could have pretended I was a better writer than I am, but I would have been kidding myself when I showed up at the OU Daily and they tore apart what I had to say. I could have not admitted to my mom how stressed I was during the middle of the semester. That would not have ever led to her suggestions about leaving certain clubs and activities behind. I could not have said anything about how I start my papers at the last minute, or that I'm worried about boring you to tears with this speech right now. That would not be fair to the essence of what I'm trying to convey. I believe in vulnerability. I believe in it because I have discovered that others have the exact same fears I do, and I bond with them through our shared perspective. I believe in vulnerability because I would not have learned how to become a better student, performing better than I ever would had I said I didn't need guidance. I believe in being honest about who you are and what you can do, because anything else is a disservice to the wide range of abilities and talents that make exceptional people inspirational. I've come to realize through always wanting to impress others, what I really desired was acceptance. And acceptance is not about making yourself look better than you really are. It is about admitting that you're actually quite terrible and realizing that that in and of itself is enough. Permittance of one's flaws does not keep you out of the elite, but instead allows you in a passage to the true love, to the concrete progress, and to the legitimate realization of your identity as an honest human being.
Growing up, I always thought that I was weird. Fitting in was really hard for the Iranian-American girl whose mom would pack her traditional Iranian food for lunch. What a weirdo. Why couldn't her mom just pack her a PB&J? When my mom would pick me up from school in small-town Oklahoma, I would beg her not to speak Farsi in front of my friends in fear that I would not look cool. My mother, a woman with a very strong personality, would tell me that what they thought doesn't matter and what makes you different makes you cool. She's right, but at the time, I ignored her words, rolled my eyes, and continued to think, why can't I just be like the kids at school? What I envied from the kids in my elementary school is that they did not have hairy arms or legs, they got to wear makeup, they got to have boyfriends, and many other superficial things an 8-year-old would admire. Most of all, they weren't Iranian. Their parents spoke English and never packed them kebabs and rice for lunch. Don't get me wrong. I loved my culture, my family, my home, but when we were in a place where it wasn't normal, I didn't want it. Then I grew up more. I started asking questions and I would actually understand the answer, like why my parents are in Oklahoma and not Iran. Both of my parents carry quite unique and remarkable stories that would take too long to write, but the commonality that I found between the two is that they wanted a better life for themselves and their future families. What my family has sacrificed to come to the United States is far more important than what an 8-year-old fears would be seen as uncool. My mom is the way she is because of her experiences throughout life. That's why she didn't care what anyone had to say. My dad is now an immigration lawyer and he works to help people have the life that he has now. As most kids grow out of puberty, they begin to realize that their parents aren't that embarrassing. This happened to me as well. But as I realized that most of my fears of being weird and uncool were in my head, I mostly began to feel guilty for the years that I spent begging my family to change and be something that they are not. Hopefully one day I can give back to my parents what they gave to me. Today I can tell you that I am beyond proud of my culture and my family, even my extra long arm hair occasionally. I found a new understanding of my life, and as I learned more about my family's history, the world, and all the different cultures, I found a love for the differences that unite us. I think that open-mindedness is something that many people could benefit and learn from, especially today in our world. The younger version of me was worried that closed-minded people would not see me like them. Thinking like this turns me into them. What we need to do is educate and inform people about the sacrifices that my parents and millions of other parents have made for their families. We can change the social norms that are constructed and break them down. Open-mindedness is being able to step outside of one's own point of view to consider the merits of alternative perspectives with a willingness to change one's beliefs when that is warranted. Take a step outside of the small box that we are always almost confined in. Challenge ideas that have been rooted in us since we were able to think. Take a chance on life and don't stay in one place forever. Travel, meet new people, take up a new language. Most of all, learn. Learn about how the grass grows and learn about why the sky is blue. Talk to people, ask them their story and why they are where they are. Being empathetic and willing to understand the world around us is the epitome of open-mindedness.